Kingdom Hearts franchise has been known for a lot of stuff, but the key known one that people recognize the most are, of course, the different variety of Keyblades. And, these are just a handful of Keyblades that I technically own. Well, handful being 2. But yeah, I love Keyblades. That was actually really hard to do right there, getting all those Keyblades to work together and stuff like that. Well, trust me, I've got 3 others hanging on that wall. I wouldn't be able to hold all of them, but that might be a future picture that I might try to do for Twitter. That'd be fun to do, actually, I think. If you couldn't tell right off the back, I'm planning to do a top 10 Keyblade list, which is going to be hypocritical. This is going to be a very hypocritical list, and there's a few reasons why. I've actually had a couple rules written down for me when coming up with this list. So, rule number 1, certain Keyblades are off the list, and the reason why I say they're off the list is because of, well, for starters, these are the basic Keyblades that most people would choose, you know? You got the regular Kingdom Key, Oblivion, and Oathkeeper, which we all know that if you're going to make a Kingdom Hearts list, it's almost default that any of those 3 would be part of that list, especially considering the fact that a lot of people just recognize them, you know? The Kingdom Key is the base Keyblade that Sora starts off with. You're almost always guaranteed to see an Oblivion and Oathkeeper, so it makes sense. Not only that, but Roxas uses the Oathkeeper and Oblivion, so you kind of have to put them together, technically. So I'm not going to include them on the list just for that reason, but know that they are my personal favorites. Rule number 2. No inclusion of the Ultima weapons. Now, here's the reason why. Because we've had 3 Ultima weapons. A lot of people would recognize the Kingdom Hearts 2 variant of Ultimate Weapon. But here's the thing. We've seen that Keyblade for a long-ass time. Now, record, yes. In Burst by Sleep, specifically, that Keyblade is stylized slightly different. But it still kind of looks the same to Kingdom Hearts 2 Ultima Weapon. Especially in terms of colorization, of course. Kingdom Hearts 3, I absolutely love the design. I love the redness and stuff like that. But also, too, technically speaking, if I had to pick a particular favorite of Ultimate Weapons, I love the very first one. The very first one. You have this traditional sword, but also, too, the fact of the different design texture that comes with the Ultimate Weapon itself. Now, here's the thing. As a kid, I always called it the Ultimate Weapon. Because, well, of course, it's Ultimate Weapon. But here's the thing, it's technically phrased as Ultima Weapon. Like the magic Ultima. So, I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, it's Ultima, not Ultimate. Now, of course, when it comes to coming up with this particular list of top 10 Keyblades, I also had another rule to add on to as well. And that is not the inclusion of Keyblade transformations. Now, of course, we're going to be mentioning the Keyblades that you will see in Kingdom Hearts 3, but we're going to more or less look at the design of the Keyblades themselves, rather than the actual transformation itself. Although I will contradict myself when I say that, specifically for like 1 or 2 of the Keyblades whenever I talk about them, but for the most part, we're mostly going to be looking at the designs. The designs is what I love about the Keyblade, as well as the symbolism behind that Keyblade per se. Much like how I talked about the Oblivion and Oathkeeper and Ultimate Weapon and stuff like that. Their symbolism on their own, but as a kid and everything like that, they kind of stand up through the test of time. Especially from like Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts 2, Burst by Sleep also as well. Many other ones on top of that. So, without further ado, here is my top 10 favorite Keyblades, which some of you will question, of course. Number 10 is the Jungle Keyblade. Now, I know what you're gonna say. This is a very simplistic Keyblade on its own. By itself, it's very simplistic, and I can understand when you look at it and stuff like that. It's basically a twig with a bunch of twigs put together. Thus, the Jungle Keyblade. But here's the thing, there are actually a number of reasons for why it is very important, in my personal opinion. Number 1, it's the very first alternate Keyblade chain, which that's technically what they are, they're chains that you can equip to the Keyblade, because they're not different Keyblades, they're just chains that change the Keyblade itself. So, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, point being, this is the first different Keyblade that we get in Kingdom Hearts 1. In fact, in the entire Kingdom Hearts series, it's the first different Keyblade that we actually can change, you know? you first think to yourself, oh, the Keyblade is the ultimate weapon, there's no reason you would want to change it. But then you start to realize, it can change? You know, it can change. So the Kingdom Key is the first Keyblade, the alternate Keyblade that you can get in the game, technically. It's the very first one. Not only that, but also too, because of copyright infringements, very touchy subject, we may never see Deep Jungle, much less the world of Tarzan, ever again in a Kingdom Hearts game. Even if we were to reboot Kingdom Hearts 1, which technically it would be a reboot when you think about it, even if we was to remake it and stuff like that, we would never actually get to see Deep Jungle, because Tarzan will not show up again. That's why we don't see him in Chain of Memories. It's because of the fact that, unfortunately, due to copyright infringement laws and stuff like that, the original creator pulled Tarzan away from Disney, for where Disney could never make any new property involving Tarzan ever again. And so, even though we can still watch the movie and stuff like that, we won't see anything new coming out of Tarzan. But there's also a third reason. And it's something that I've come to learn in the Kingdom Hearts franchise. And that is the importance of reach. Now, you may not know this, but there's actually a scientific method of being able to fight in Kingdom Hearts, or any video game for that matter that involves distance, okay? The longer the weapon, the better the reach, and more likely you will not have to be right next to the enemy in order to remotely hit them. So it's like, you know, you'll hit one Heartless, but because of how long the weapon could be, you could hit 3 or 4 Heartlesses in an area. That's why Keyblades, like the ultimate weapon and stuff like that, are such awesome weapons, because of how long the Keyblade is, and it's able to knock down an army of Heartlesses right off the back. You know, it's pretty insane to think that reach is a very important thing. And it's very important when you think about it, because compare the Jungle Key to the Fairy Key. The Fairy Key is arguably the most smallest Keyblade you will ever see in any Kingdom Hearts game. In fact, next to that would be the Keyblade that you get when you clear the Dwarf Woodlands. It's pretty stubby on its own, but not as stubby as the Fairy Keyblade. And so the Jungle Keyblade has this reach, and so it's because of that, it's why I think it's very important to include it onto the list, personally myself. Number 9 is the Starlight Keyblade. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, this is a Union Cross Keyblade. Why are you including it? Have you played Union Cross? And the answer to that is, no, I have not. But that does not mean I can acknowledge the lore behind the Starlight Keyblade. If you don't know, the Starlight Keyblade is the starter weapon Keyblade that you get when you play Union Cross. Now, of course, with that being said, in Kingdom Hearts 3, once you beat the Heartless Demon Tide boss and everything like that, and you clear that particular segment and stuff, you get the Starlight Keyblade. And while the Keyblade by itself isn't uniquely different compared to the Kingdom Key, it's actually a pretty elegant design. It's got this purple hilt instead of the gold hilt itself, and then you have the star shape at the end of the Keyblade rather than a normal key shape. So it has a very elegant design in my personal opinion, and I actually like it. Enough to where I had to get my own, of course, if you've noticed. Number 8 is Darknessgazer. Now, this Keyblade can only be attained through Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days. And I wanted to include this Keyblade because while there were a few other Keyblades that I liked it out of days, this one I liked it the most because of its uniqueness. It's got a very blunt end, and it's very rigid, and really I like the color texture behind that particular Keyblade. So it's one of those things where it's like, I really like that particular design, and I really like that particular edging of that Keyblade. I mean, can you imagine wielding that particular Keyblade? That's probably one of those heavy Keyblades, you know, like the one that Terra can wield one-handed and stuff like that. This is the one that you had to two-hand it because of how heavy it's going to be, and when you finally hit the Heartless, it's not going to cut through them, it's going to crush their freaking skulls. Do Heartless have skulls? You know, I never really thought about stopping myself and asking myself, do Heartless actually have skulls? I imagine they probably have some kind of skeletal thing because of, like, Halloween Town and stuff. But now that I think about it, do they have skulls? I mean, they're essentially just dark material and stuff like that, but do they have skeletals? That's a good question. But either way, this is more of a crushing weapon, it looks like, rather than a slashing weapon that we're used to for many Kingdom Hearts games, of course. Number 7 belongs to Classic Tone. This Keyblade in particular you would not normally get through the main game. The only way you can get this in Kingdom Hearts 3 is by collecting all of the individual classic mini-games that's within Kingdom Hearts 3. These 2D Game & Watch games that involve Sora and Mickey and everything like that. By getting all of them and stuff like that, you do get the Classic Tone. Now, here's the thing. I know a lot of people like Favorite Deputy, but here's the thing. While Favorite Deputy works well in terms of the aesthetics and stuff, I like Classic Tone just a little bit better because of, well, for what the theme is. It's essentially Toontown's Keyblade. Toontown's Keyblade. If you don't know, Toontown in not so much in Kingdom Hearts, but rather in Disneyland and stuff like that, it's very cartoony, it's very stretchy and stuff like that. And the theming for Classic Toon actually matches that. It matches that aesthetics of comedic and rubberiness and stuff like that. And I really like the design of the Keyblade as well. It's very cartoony and very creative, actually. I really, really appreciate the design of this Keyblade. And again, contradiction to my ruling and stuff like that, the transformation essentially looks the same as Favorite Deputy, but I like how it works for the theming of this Keyblade. For the theming of Favorite Deputy, yeah, it's cool looking, but honestly, I like the theming for Classic Tone for the transformation of this one better, just because of the overall theming. It looks well and it looks nice, personally, in my personal opinion. Number 6 goes to Divewing. Divewing can only be attained if you A-rank every dive mission that is within Dream Drop distance. This particular Keyblade is a unique, whimsical design, I think, and I really like how it's more symbolist of a sword rather than just like an actual Keyblade. Obviously, it still has the same style look of a Keyblade, much like how the Ultima weapon is supposed to look and stuff like that, but it still has that sword shape that has that same symbolism and stuff. And I like how the different color textures and stuff like that kind of matches of how you would dive into the heart of the world and everything like that through the dive missions in Dream Drop Distance. I really like the style of this particular Keyblade. We got another Dream Drop Distant Keyblade to mention, which is number 5, known as Skull Noise. This can only be attained by clearing through Traverse Town, and of course, if you don't know, in Dream Drop Distance, you encounter the World's Ends With You characters in Traverse Town, from Neku, to Shiki, to Beat, to Rhyme, and Joshua. And all of these themings of Traverse Town meeting up with the World's Ends With You. The World's Ends With You actually takes over in this Keyblade's case, and I really dig the design of this Keyblade. This design is really cool. I really love it. There's actually a little bit of symbolism if you don't realize what's going on with this Keyblade. For example, the handle obviously has the headphones that Neku wears, but then you see like the noise Reaper texture that comes into the actual blade part of the Keyblade itself. But here's the thing, I think that's more or less from Beat rather than, you know, the Reaper games and stuff like that. And the reason why I say it comes from Beat mostly is because of the fact that if you don't know, the World's Ends With You, Beat technically joins with the Reapers, and he does have Reaper powers. I don't know if they carry through, but he does technically have them when he joins you in a pack and stuff like that. He has somewhat of Reaper powers and stuff. So it's one of those things where I think the symbolism works well for Skull Noise, and I really love the design of this Keyblade. It really looks awesome. Next up, we have number 4, which is that of the, I believe it's pronounced Fira Keyblade? Fira? I want to say it's Fira, but I'm not sure of the proper pronunciation. It's basically basically naming. If you don't know, technically in Final Fantasy VII, Cloud has a bike where it is called Fira. And then technically it's also a name for a summon, which is more of a wolf design, which would also make sense for Evangelion theming with the wolf and everything like that. But aside from that point, this Keyblade has several reasons for why I love it. Number 1, it looks freaking awesome. This is a badass Keyblade. The only downside to this Keyblade, arguably due to the ability, is that it is a Berserk Keyblade, meaning that when you run out of MP, you don't actually cast a finisher move. You're just constantly doing like combo plus and everything like that until your magic bar refills, which works really well in certain areas and stuff like that of the game. But by itself, it's not really that handy. But the blade itself is a really cool Keyblade as well. You can only get this in Kingdom Hearts 2 after you beat Sephiroth, of course. But I love the design, I love the idea behind it, and I love the naming, especially if you're a Final Fantasy fan and you can relate to the name and stuff like that, and you can pinpoint exactly where it is. It definitely stands strong as a Keyblade on its own. Number 3 is Happy Gears. Happy Gears can only be attained, if you haven't figured this out by now, through the Monsters Incorporated world. Now, here's the thing. When I first saw this Keyblade, I knew I had to have it. I love how this Keyblade looks. I love how it works. It is seriously like one of the coolest Keyblade designs I've ever seen. Just by itself, the design is really cool. But also, too, the transformation works really well in the process, too. It's really fun transformation. Technically, it also has the same transformation, the first phase anyway. The second phase, not so much, but the first phase of the Frozen Keyblade, technically. But I like this version better, just because of how cool and how well it works in combat and stuff. And personally, I really enjoy it. It's a very fun transformation, and it's a really fun Keyblade too. It's very fun. There's a reason why it's called Happy Gears, because it obviously the theming of Monsters Incorporated, they try to incorporate laughter instead of screams, you know? So it makes sense for the theming, but also too, I love the creativity that went into this Keyblade. It's so awesome looking, and I love it. Number 2 goes to Become One. This is a theme Keyblade after you get this in Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix specifically, after you beat Roxas. Now, this particular Keyblade obviously takes this design style of like the Nobodies to Roxas with his bangle and everything like that when he was in Twilight Town, the date of Twilight Town specifically and stuff. But this particular theme Keyblade really looks nice. I really do love the edging of the Keyblade. I love the coloring. I love the design. This is a really unique Keyblade, and it really strongs home to Roxas' theme for a Keyblade, and it really works well in my personal opinion. There are so many Keyblades. I know there are a lot of Keyblades, some of which I have went into a lot of details because of what they are. Some of them I didn't go into too much detail because, well, how much detail could you really go based on the design and stuff like that? But really, there's another Keyblade that I absolutely love, mostly because I love just the look of it, I love the design, I love who it technically belongs to, it makes sense and everything like that nature. It is Lost Memory. Number 1 is Lost Memory. This is my number 1 favorite Keyblade, alongside next to Oblivion, Oathkeeper, Omega, or Ultima, boy, that's really messed up. Ultima Keyblade, the Kingdom Key. This would be my ultimate favorite Keyblade that I would want, mostly because of the theming behind this Keyblade. Lost Memory is a Keyblade that can only be attained when you play through Finn's story. Before he goes into the Badlands, he attains this Keyblade, and this Keyblade looks daggum awesome. This is by far the coolest looking Keyblade out there. I love the design on this Keyblade alone. The design just works with this Keyblade. The coloring, while it's mostly gray, works well for this blade. But also too, a little bit of red on the tip, which is a heart shape. But if you notice, that heart shape is slightly broken, and that's because Finn's heart is broken because of the fact that Vanitas is ripped from him. If you don't know, Vanitas is the dark side of Finn's heart, and so Ven has to eventually fight off against Vanitas. And of course, in Birth by Sleep, if the two were to actually fight, they merge and form the Keyblade, known as the X-Blade, of course. But I love the theming for this Keyblade. I love the design. It's my personal favorite. I really like how it looks. And the sad thing is, I haven't seen anyone do a replica version of this Keyblade. I rarely see this, and it's a shame too, because this is a really cool looking design. Again, aside from a few minor details, of course, like I said, the Oblivion and Oathkeeper, as well as, I keep calling it Omega all of a sudden. Oh my gosh, I'm doing terrible right now. Ultima Keyblade and Kingdom Key. Those are my absolute favorite Keyblades, that as soon as I'm able to get it, I immediately equip it with me, and it pretty much stays with me throughout the entire time, almost, depending on the weakness and strengths and stuff like that of the Keyblade. But ultimately, these are my ultimate favorite Keyblades. There are so many more Keyblades out there that are so deserving of the list. There's just a lot of them. There's a lot of good Keyblades. There's a lot of good designed Keyblades. It's like, as soon as I was trying to make this list, I started to realize to myself, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought, and it really is a lot harder, but I just wanted to make this list just because I like how the Keyblades are looking in terms of, like, the future series and stuff. So, anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.